Now, this is a story all about how Will Smith rose to fame and came around, and I'd like to take a half an hour, just sit there, and I'll tell you about this show called Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So,
Yes.
clearly, I don't need to explain what the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is. But even my husband, Nicholas, shout out, who has seen maybe 2 minutes of this show combined, he knows the whole theme song. So if you've never heard of the show, I'm sure we're not the best podcast for you. Unless you are a youngin' doing research, then a jumbo, by all means, pull up a seat and join us. But yeah, a lot of this is going to be based on my own knowledge today, but I've done quite a bit of research, which honestly, I have to say, since we've started this podcast, I've learned a lot of like little details about the topics we're covering. And I just want to say it's been so much fun so far.
Oh my
But
God, no, it's the best. This research, honestly, it's just not only is it taking us back to like things that are obviously nostalgic to us, but then we get more like in-depth knowledge to things and it's just like fireworks go off, I feel.
yes, yeah, we're really enjoying this. So, everyone who has been supporting us so far, thank you so much for
Yes.
giving us this our time. But yeah, anywho, getting back on track, my resources for today are Wikipedia, Independent, Final Draft, Carleton College, no relation to Carlton Banks, The Fresh Prince Reunion that aired on HBO Max, Fandom Wiki, Cracked, and YouTube. So if you're here for research, here's a quick little spiel on what The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was about. I mean, I could just sing the whole theme song and it would describe it, but anyway, so Will was played by Will Smith. He is this troubled teen in Philadelphia, and his mom cannot handle his behavior anymore. So she sends him to live with her sister, Vivian, and her family, which is her husband, Phil, and her children, Hillary, Carlton, Ashley, and then eventually later in the show, Nikki. And this family is rich. So Phil is a judge. And I mean, yeah, they live in Bel Air, so duh, they're rich. So they live in this big mansion and they have a butler, Jeffrey, who is also in the show. And Will is not used to this lifestyle, nor like how to behave in this environment. So that's where the comedy of the show comes in. It's two worlds meshing into one. Will is the same age as his cousin Carlton, who is played by Alfonso Ribeiro, but they could not be any more different. So Will is more into like hip hop, and this is like late 80s, early 90s hip hop. And I'll just say Carlton's idol is Tom Jones. Yeah, you're going to see that many times throughout the show. He has his own dance coined as the Carlton that he does to Tom Jones' song. It's not unusual. And while Will and Carlton spend a lot of time exchanging insults towards each other, they do also get into hijinks together and end up helping each other out a lot. So over time, they become more of like brothers than cousins. And then Hillary, who was played by Karen Parsons, was a bit older, and her character's kind of ditzy. She's not exactly stuck up, but she is like the rich, spoiled persona, but so dramatically so that it is comical. And I loved Hillary because she's so pretty, and then the clothes she would wear were just always so fabulous.
I literally was going to stop you and say she was so beautiful, and that's mainly what I remember about her, and fashion, of course. And I just thought that she, like you said, like she was so pretty. I my first thought was like she was so beautiful. So like we were just on the same like track of mind.
Yeah, she really was. Just her normal outfit was usually like a full suit, like blazer and skirt with the hats she would wear in the hills. She always looked like she was like walking out of Bloomingdale's.
That's the perfect description of it.
Yeah, like just epitome of a Bloomingdale's girl. And then we had Ashley, who was played by Tatiana Ali. She was the youngest sister, and I think she was like 11 or 12. So her character is very impressionable, and she takes a liking to Will, starts to look up to him. And Will would always teach her things like dances or raps. Like I remember the prayer when they had her say grace, and she's like, "Thank you, Lord, for this stupid food."
I don't remember that specifically, but that so sounds like something you would do.
Like Will, like taught her this whole rap for the prayer, and it ended with that. That they would always like upset the family
Amazing.
because they would value the aristocratic class that their family had, and he was just throwing a wrench in that. But yeah, so his aunt Vivian was played by Janet Hubert originally, and then Uncle Phil was played by James Avery. They were the heads of the house. Phil had an interesting relationship with Will because he did not like him very much initially, and he viewed Will as like a punk who was always looking for trouble, and he did not want his children to be influenced by Will at all. And then over the years in the show, they both grow, and you see them bond, and specifically in that scene where Will has that complete breakdown over his father not wanting him. Oh my
Oh
god.
my god.
Woo, I'm about to tear up just thinking about it because, like,
No.
the acting in that scene.
But do you know that actually that was like a real moment for Will Smith? Like he actually like that was a character break for him, and they actually say that that was something that he actually like from his
Channeled
real
it
life.
real well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes it
Yeah.
even more heartbreaking.
The things you find out, like behind the scenes stuff, it's like, wow, acting is a really interesting art.
Totally.
Then we have Jeffrey, who was played by Joseph Marcel. He was around to do his job and always remained professional and would do what he was asked. And Will would sometimes mess with him to say things or get a reaction. And they had a good dynamic because Will's character would always set Jeffrey up for funny one liners in the show. Then there was Will's best friend, Jazz, played by Will Smith's real life musical partner, DJ Jazzy Jeff. And if you saw him walk into a scene, you could count on seeing him being physically thrown out of the mansion by Uncle Phil, which became like a favorite recurring joke.
Mhm.
So, how did this show come to be? And this story has a star studded upbringing. So, you would think this show was based off Will Smith's life, but it's actually loosely based off of producer Benny Medina, who has worked with a number of famous acts, including Queen Latifah, Prince, and Babyface, and has been an exec at both Motown Records and Warner Brothers.
Wait a minute, pause. I have to pause you for one
Yeah.
second. Is this the guy that I'm sorry, I always bring it back to this show. Is it from America's Next Top Model? Was he on there? Is I have to look him up really quick. I'm sorry because if
Yeah,
this is who I think
possibly. Because Warner Brother was the one that did that show, right?
oh, this is him. Oh my god, he was. And they did a whole thing where they basically had to like pitch to him or explain to him like who they were and like what their persona was for like being famous, like what their
Mm-hmm.
persona was going to be and stuff. And it's wow, that's crazy. Okay.
Yeah. So this show is basically his upbringing,
Wow.
loosely. So Medina had become friends with a rich white boy whose family lived in Beverly Hills, and they took him in. And at this point in time, the whole black kid moving in with the white family was overdone for shows. Like when I think about that, I think of like Different Strokes.
Hmm.
Um, so they couldn't take his story exactly, so they switched it up, and that's why the lead character moves in with his family versus a white family that's not his. Benny Medina works on this with his business partner Jeff Pollock, and they take it to Quincy Jones, who had just signed a TV deal with Time Warner. And at this time, Will Smith is very well known for his rapping, as he's one half of the duo DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. So Will happened to meet Benny by chance at the Arsenio Hall show, where Medina approached him about this television show. And Will wasn't sure at first. He had never acted before, so he was pretty hesitant on actually taking this opportunity. Obviously, he came to his senses and gave us this great show. Thank goodness, because it is a great show. And not only was Will based off of Benny Medina, but the other characters were based off of real people. So Hillary and Ashley were based off of Quincy Jones' daughters, and then Carlton came from Benny's friend, who was actually named Carlton Cuse. So they did pay homage to the true story with that. And in its first season, it was recognized as the best rated new show, with its first airing on September 10th of 1990. It raked in nearly 20 million viewers every week. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made history as it put rap into mainstream, and it showed coexisting with the upper class in a way that didn't make either side feel supreme to the other. It showed how the upper class takes themselves very seriously, and Will is just not having it at all. Entertainment Weekly said this series was one of the few that consistently acknowledges a full range of African American lives. So, while having an approach of silliness, the show covered issues including class privilege, race, sex, and identity. Now, in my research for this, I came across some opinion pieces that brought in some other perspectives of the show, and I found them really insightful. So, I did want to share some of them. The first one was a writer named Karen Maxey. She wrote on the Final Draft blog about the relationship between Phil and Will. In the pilot episode, Phil tells Will he should learn about what someone is about before criticizing them, which makes sense, and he's a judge by trade. However, most of us know the full picture of the show, and as time goes on, Phil does kind of judge Will, like from the get go, based on his background versus what he's about. So it's interesting to see that character build from the pilot. I also read an essay by Jeffrey Besoy, a Carleton College class of 2016 student who wrote his senior thesis on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was actually born in Cameroon, and he moved here in the US with his mother in 1999. He was teased in school for being different in the sense he had African roots, and he was actually teased by black kids. He discusses how he ended up finding his circle. He used the term brotherhood, and he discusses how the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made an impact on their lives and gave them conversation starters every week to discuss important issues they all dealt with in their lives, and it helped them to bond. So again, the father-son relationship between Phil and Will comes up as many people in his group, including him, grew up without fathers. He also discusses how the show highlights blackness in a way that had never been done before, that allowed folks of all races to understand. And he brought up the Cosby Show, which came around first, and how it showed black people in a different way, as the Huxtable family was well off. But the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air shows this with a character like Will to challenge them, and it shows both sides, making it approachable and understandable for people of all races and all walks of life. And he ends up saying this show helped him appreciate his own blackness. It's a really great essay. I will link it in the show notes, as we always do, but if you are interested in what I've said so far, I recommend reading his essay. It's very insightful, and obviously, Carleton College features it on their website, so it's a well-written piece. Clearly, the show was impactful on many people in many ways. It also shed a light on hip hop culture in a way that had never been done before, which exposed it to new audiences, which I say God bless, because hip hop's incredible. And it's not the same as it used to be, but back then it was great. Now, we cannot discuss The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air without talking about the biggest controversy of the show, Aunt Vivian. So originally, Janet Hubert played Aunt Vivian, but was recasted after the third season. After that, she was played by Daphne Maxwell Reid. And I feel like I stand with the majority on this when I say I prefer OG Aunt Viv. But I have nothing against Daphne either. It's just you begin to love a character in the way that they are, and we just don't want change, right?
Yeah, and it's like we know that sometimes like pilot episodes they'll change characters after they realize like maybe the pilot it didn't run so well and like they'll change a character up. But after 3 seasons, like you said, when you've grown to love or grown to really know a character and they're a staple in a show, you can't really, I mean, you did it, but it's weird when they switch them out and they're like, we don't know what you're talking about. Nothing happened.
Right, yeah, like it was weird, yeah. I'm definitely OG Aunt Viv. And we're actually justified in this feeling because in the reunion show that aired on HBO Max a couple years ago, it's revealed that Will Smith was the one to get our Aunt Viv, Janet Hubert, fired from the show. So apparently they would have a lot of disagreements. He was one of those stubborn kids who had a lot to learn in life, but they know everything. Meanwhile, she's this woman who, knows her power and isn't going to tolerate being treated any kind of way or misspoken to. She would put him in his place a lot. So, with him being the lead, he's kind of got that ego. And he made sure that she was let go before the fourth season started. And they replaced her. And in the reunion, if you haven't seen it, Will and Janet actually meet in it looks like a theater, like in the seats. And they have this conversation on camera where apparently this is the first time they've communicated since working together. And Will apologizes to Janet and he accepts responsibility for his actions, which it's nice. However, it's really sad on Janet's end of the conversation, and she does make sure she gets to communicate what his actions did to her. It's a pretty heartbreaking thing to watch. But she shares that losing her job is it not only gave her the struggles of losing a job, but she was also blacklisted from Hollywood, and then her own family, her own blood, ridiculed her for losing the job, and she still faces a lot of judgment. And that's an environment and a group of people that should be supporting her. So
Wow.
I must say it was inspiring to watch her speak on that because he apologized and good on him. But it's so much easier to just say 3 syllables, I'm sorry, than to go on and suffer like that for all these years, honestly, decades.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of men in the industry, we see like our boy Justin Timberlake will get away with that. Where due to their actions, a woman's career is tarnished, and then she faces judgment for the rest of her life, and then they get to go about on with their lives, and they're like deemed as one of the greats. So, in this way, she's saying, I accept your apology. You don't have a full understanding of what you are apologizing for, and I need to give you that before we squash this. And for me, that was pretty powerful to see that. And honestly, that's what her acting as Aunt Viv brought. Like, she was a very powerful, strong woman, the matriarch of the household. And the way Daphne played her was more of like easygoing. And I'm not trying to insult her in any way. Like, she was directed and scripted that way. And I'm sure, especially after they dealt with Janet, like, they made her that way. But I mean, the original Aunt Vivian was just a very powerful woman, and that's why I loved her. Now, highlighting Janet's work, I wanted to talk about some iconic moments for the show. So I wanted to start off with Aunt Viv's big dance number. Do you remember that where she's in the aerobics class? So if you don't know what
Yeah.
we're talking about, what happens is Aunt Viv is taking this like dance aerobics class, and there's this, young girl, probably in her early 20s, that keeps giving her dirty looks like, what are you even doing in this class? And Vivian just goes off in her freestyle, nails it, and the girl is just shooketh. And it's amazing. It's amazing. That is the Aunt Viv I love. Another iconic dance in this show was anytime Carlton did the Carlton.
Yes.
Like, how insane it is, like, just a silly dance move that becomes so iconic that it's named after the character doing it for all of eternity in society.
Right. I can still visualize it in my head right now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Alfonso Ribeiro actually got inspiration for this move from two people. So I was curious and I looked into this. So he got it. It's funny. So Courtney Cox and Eddie Murphy are the two people that came together to inspire this.
Wait, I get it.
So Courtney Cox was in a Bruce Springsteen music video, dancing with him on stage. Look it up, and if you're, we'll make a reel with the visuals too. But Eddie Murphy then does a joke about it in his stand up, and he's pretty much making fun of the way white people dance, and he imitates her dance moves. So
Yeah.
then Alfonso Ribeiro took that and made that into the Carlton. And the whole point of the Carlton character is like the white boy. Like he is internally a white boy. So that's where the dance move came from. And I thought that was super interesting. Cause I was
I love
curious,
it.
I always wondered, like, did he just make that up and that's what it became, or was there some history? So I looked that up because I didn't want to come to the podcast today without an answer.
I love that.
And then, of course, as we mentioned, there's the emotional breakdown that Will has over his father abandoning him when he's talking to Uncle Phil. And then you see them bond. And honestly, I tear up every time I watch that because so many young men and boys, they need a dad and they go through this. And Will's acting in that scene. And like you said, like he wasn't fully acting on that. But that was such a good scene and very
Mhm.
few scenes that I've seen in my entire life on any movies or shows like run rent free in my head like that. I think like the only other one would be like Zendaya's mental breakdown in Euphoria when she finds out her mom flushed the drugs down the toilet. Anyway, we'll get back on track. I am almost done here. So I also just wanted to point out some of the actresses that had guest starred on the show as Will's girlfriends. So we had Tyra Banks, who was Jackie, and then Nia Long played Lisa. And apparently Lisa was only in one season, which is kind of weird.
Oh,
I could have sworn she was in like three of them at least. I thought she was in
yeah.
a long. I loved Lisa, but others included Tisha Campbell, which I know best from My Wife and Kids. And then we also had Jasmine Guy, best known for A Different World, and then Kim Fields from The Facts of Life. And there were also a lot of memorable guest stars in the show. We had Queen Latifah, D.L. Hughley, Boys to Men, Jay Leno, Hugh Hefner, Raven Simone, and dun dun dun, Chris Rock. That aged poorly.
Smack.
But yes, that is what I have about Fresh Prince. It was truly an iconic show that did things differently than they'd ever been done before. And I truly think that was an iconic 90s show.
Oh my god, thank you for taking us back because honestly, yeah, that was definitely one of my faves of the 90s.